Committee to free Julian Assange, and we're here today in front of the Swedish Consulate on June the 3rd to protest the Swedish government's attack on Julian Assange. Despite the fact that they don't have any charges, they want to continue to harass Julian Assange. And what we're saying is that it's the Swedish government really that should be put on trial along with the United States government for supporting war, for profiteering off of military equipment that has been used in illegal wars around the world. And the clearest and most immediate sign of that is the Swedish government supplying millions of dollars of equipment to Saudi Arabia, which was engaged in an illegal criminal war on the people of Yemen. And that is a war crime, genocidal war crime, the bombing of the people of Yemen by the United States supplied jets from Saudi Arabia, by the United States, which has been actively supporting the U.S. war crimes in Yemen, and refueling jets. The United States military have been refueling jets that are then bombing in Yemen. These are war crimes that the governments don't want to talk about. So what we are saying is that the real criminals are not Julian Assange, are not Chelsea Manning, are not the whistleblower Snowden, but those governments that have engaged in covering up this. And what we are saying is the espionage charges against Julian Assange are a threat to all journalists, throughout the world, because if they can arrest and jail journalists who are releasing information about governments, about corporations, they want to silence any exposure of the real war criminals. And that's really what's going on. And we believe that the attack on Julian Assange is another example of the dangerous threat to journalists and free speech of people around the world. The crimes that were exposed by Julian Assange, what were they? Well, one of them was in the Iraq War, how U.S. troops were murdering journalists, were murdering people, murdering civilians without any justification. It was a war crime, and guess what? The United States government hasn't prosecuted any of the people that were engaged in those war crimes. They haven't prosecuted the war criminals, really, who were engaged in it, because the United States government, whether it's Democrat or Republican, are engaged in these war crimes. It was war crimes that happened under Bush, there are war crimes that happened under Obama, and there are war crimes that are happening today under Trump. Trump has disregarded, actually, a majority vote of the Senate and the Congress against more military weapons to Saudi Arabia, which are being used directly on the people of Yemen. Yet Trump is continuing to support this destruction and genocide against the people of Yemen. So what we're saying is the campaign to free Julian Assange is also a campaign to expose the crimes that have been revealed in WikiLeaks, which the government wants to shut down. These crimes that by the government around WikiLeaks also expose the Clinton administration and Hillary Clinton. Hillary was involved as Secretary of State in overturning the government of Guatemala and putting up these generals. Now, one of the criminal things about really the propaganda blitz in this country is when they talk about immigrants and migrants coming to the United States, they never talk about what the United States did in overthrowing the government of Guatemala. Isn't that strange? The United States was involved in overthrowing the government of Guatemala, allowing repression of the people of Guatemala. There was just a strike of teachers and medical workers. They never talk about the role of the United States in actually bringing about a massive crisis, humanitarian crisis, driving the people of Guatemala, of El Salvador, out of their countries towards the border. I mean, we, the United States government, not we, the United States government have been involved in massacres, have been involved in killing people in Central America and in Mexico. The drug war in Mexico is the United States involvement. There are U.S. military units in Mexico. Now we blame the Mexicans. This criminal government, the Trump government, who the Democrats do not want to impeach, is involved in crimes against humanity. Imagine that. Mexico is abusing the United States. Mexico is the abuser. I mean, think about that. U.S. capitalist companies, the multinationals, have been involved in privatizing Mexico. stealing the land from the farm workers, ejidos, privatizing the telecom. And the fact of the matter is, the United States government, along with the Swedish government, want Julian Assange jailed. They would like him killed. And we are concerned that right now, in the prison that he is in Britain, he may be being ejected with drugs, as they have done to other people, to destroy him. We don't know what the condition of Julian Assange is. His lawyers, his family are very concerned about that. And we believe that his life is under threat. And that's another reason we're here today. But we know that the Swedish government, along with the U.S. government, do not really care about humanity. They do not care about lives. They're interested in profiteering. They're interested in selling more military equipment. That's what these governments are about. And we're going to stand here and demand freedom for Julian Assange. The International Federation of Journalists, other unions around the world, his own union, MEEA, in Australia are supporting him. He's been a member of the Journalists Union since 2011. He was a member of the Journalists Union. He is a journalist, but whether he's a journalist or not, he should not be prosecuted. He should not be imprisoned. And this campaign by capitalist governments, the UK government, the Swedish government, the American government, and the Ecuadorian government to get rid of Julian Assange is that they want to continue the cover-up of Julian Assange. So we're also going to have another rally on June the 12th when the U.S. government will be having a hearing in Britain to extradite him to the United States. I think that the government of the United States is a government of war criminals. It's a government of racists, of people who support Nazis. Why is the U.S. government and the Israeli government arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine? Why are they sending weapons around the world? That's what we're talking about. Those are the real issues that we're addressing here, and we're saying that the Swedish government needs to be put on trial. The war criminals that have supplied weapons to bomb people around the world have to be put on trial. Those are the real war criminals. And we call on people around the world to demand the Swedish government drop any charges, drop the demand for extradition to Sweden, and that there be an exposure of the real role of the Swedish government in this cover-up. Really a conspiracy to go after Julian Assange.
Julian Assange is an editor, he's a publisher, and he's languishing in prison right now in what's called the Guantanamo of the UK because he succeeded in finding a way to expose the dark side of this US empire. Now, the British have been quite enthusiastic about extraditing Assange to the United States to face Espionage Act charges. But even in their enthusiasm, they have not been unwilling to follow a few basic judicial niceties, like putting off last week's court date because Assange was so ill that he could not make it to the court. He couldn't even make it by a video link. But it does appear that next week, even if he's still ill and incoherent as he has been, it is expected that they will be going to carry out their judicial process within the medical wing of Belmarsh Prison. Now, the Swedes, on the other hand, have been a little more crass about this. Julian Assange was not able to confer with his lawyer regarding the court procedures today. And not only that, but the legal documents for this court procedure have not even been translated into English and will not be translated until Monday of next week. So he hasn't had a chance to see anything, even in his medical state. So they show up trying to get a European arrest warrant for Julian Assange today, and it turns out that the judicial authorities and the prosecutors in Sweden are so incompetent that they had absolutely no idea that you cannot get an arrest warrant for somebody who is being investigated for a crime. Instead, you have to get a European warrant for investigation, and what that would mean is that they would have to go to Britain in order to interview Assange about this investigation, which leaves us back where we were 8 years ago.
My name is Gloria Lariva. On behalf of the Answer Coalition, I wish to express our fullest solidarity, as I know that many others feel, for Julian Assange, who has so courageously for years used through the means of WikiLeaks the exposure of U.S. war crimes, British war crimes, and anything that has harmed the people of the world. His documents have been demonized. He has been demonized while he was sequestered basically in the Ecuadorian embassy after President Lenín Moreno came in. He has been silenced for months. If he had been able to speak as he had before and issue documents as he had before, the world would know so much more of what the U.S. is doing to carry out war, sanctions, occupation. And right now, Trump is in London. There's expected to be hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating tomorrow. I hope that among the demands against Trump will be the demand for freedom for Julian Assange. I'm confident that will happen, but it will take the efforts of people of the United States and people of the world who are fighting for the truth against U.S. imperialism, to expose what the U.S. is doing, regardless of what is happening to Assange. He has given us enough ammunition of the truth to be able to continue exposing U.S. war crimes. But it's an outrage. As Chelsea Manning has also been demonized, has been thrown in jail again and again for refusing to cooperate with a fishing expedition, an attempt to silence more people by the grand jury. And so we have to stay strong, say no to U.S. war, no sanctions, no coup. The U.S. media, it's not only that Assange has been silenced and he's facing life in prison through trumped-up charges against the journalists, charges against the truth, but the U.S. media is carrying out a fierce war against the people of Venezuela in trying to portray a picture of Venezuela as ungovernable in such a state of chaos that the U.S. must intervene through war and sanctions that are actually killing the people of Venezuela. So solidarity with Julian Assange. Free him now.
With the U.S. government and the British government to silence Julian Assange, to kill Julian Assange. That's what we're talking about. Murder of Julian Assange, murder of Chelsea Manning. That's what they'd really like to do. And that's why U.S. capitals, politicians have called for him to be put on trial and murdered. That's the real terrorism. The truth tellers, the people who tell the truth about the war crimes, they're the ones that get blamed. They're the ones that these governments say are criminals. We say exactly the opposite. We say the Swedish government here in the consulate and the Swedish government officials should start putting their own officials on trial for war crimes, for selling weapons to people all over the world who engaged in war crimes. The war crimes in Yemen that are going on have been supplied by the Swedish government. They have a big military weapons industry. They are profiting from selling weapons to countries that are committing war crimes. Why aren't they in trial? Instead, they're going after Julian Assange, who has exposed it through WikiLeaks. And we say enough is enough. Put the real war criminals on trial. The Swedish government has framed up Julian Assange. They've spent millions of dollars in a so-called rape investigation that they can't show. And actually, the real criminals are not being put on trial. That's what we're saying. The Swedish government and officials in the Swedish government, in collusion with executives of Sweden, have been selling weapons to countries engaged in war crimes. Why is there no trial of those? Why have they been silent about those? The fact of the matter is they are covering up war crimes. That's why they're going after WikiLeaks. And we say this is an attack on journalists everywhere. The International Federation of Journalists have called for his freedom. The Australian Journalist Union have called for his freedom. His freedom is being demanded by people all over the world because he's a truth seeker, because WikiLeaks has exposed these war crimes. And that's why they're after Chelsea Manning. That's why she's in jail right now in a frame-up of a grand jury. She's in jail to punish her because she's told the truth about U.S. crimes. And of course, who in the government and who are the leading Democrats? Are they talking about Julian Assange? They're saying, no, he should be jailed. He's a threat to the United States. The biggest threat to the United States are the real war criminals that run these governments. That's the biggest threat to the United States and the people of the world. They're spending trillions on war, and people are dying in San Francisco in the street. People can't get health care. People can't get housing in San Francisco. Yet they say that they're supporting the people. No, they do not represent people. They represent the war profiteers. The Saudi Arabian government and the prince in Saudi Arabia, MEB, who was involved in murder of a journalist. What do they say about him? They're negotiating with him. They're giving him money. They're giving him weapons. This is the real role of the United States. That was a crime. And who's going on trial for that? Nobody is going on trial for that because the U.S. government is protecting Saudi Arabia. The U.S. government is giving them weapons to continue their illegal war in Yemen, their criminal war. I mean, what they're doing now in Yemen with the support of the United States, that is a war crime. Bombing schools, bombing water plants, destroying the infrastructure in Yemen. That's a war crime. Are they being charged with war crimes? Hell no. Hell no. The United States government, which is engaged in war crimes, they're free. They don't want to talk about that. Instead, they want to jail Julian Assange. They want to kill him and other whistleblowers. And Snowden and the other whistleblowers who've released this information did it because they want the people of the United States to know about the real war crimes. They want the people of the United States to know, you have to stop this. You have to stop this because it's illegal. It's against the people of the world. And these war criminals that run the U.S. government, that run the Swedish government, that run the British government have to be held accountable. They are attacking working people around the world. They're attacking unions around the world. That's really what's going on. And we demand that Julian Assange be free. We demand that Chelsea Manning be free. We demand that the real war criminals who run the U.S. government, who run the Swedish government, they're the ones that should be on trial. They're the ones that should be investigated. And
Sweden, UK, let him go. People have a right to know.
Sweden, UK, let him go. People have a right to know.
Sweden, UK, let him go. People have a right to know.
Sweden, UK, let him go. Free Julian Assange now. Put the war criminals on trial.
Julian Assange now.
Free. You want to speak?
Exposing war crimes is not a crime. Exposing war crimes is not a crime. Free Julian Assange.
Free Julian Assange.
Exposing war crimes is not a crime.
Exposing war crimes is not a crime.
Free Julian Assange.